Okay, I think I'm at the end of my notes. So, without anything more, I'd like to turn it over to the floor for questions. As last time, we will have 2 roving mics, and myself and Petra will be on the other side. And we will move up and down, getting to people as we pass by. And we have until 8 o'clock again for questions. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll get to everyone. I know last time we got mostly to people and then had a couple right at the end that we didn't get to. But I think if Petra can find the first person, we'll get into answering your questions.
That survey for online for the PFR for the council, or the one that was sent out, the online one does not work. It doesn't go. It doesn't work. I tried many times.
Okay, so I would ask that you come in and get some help with that. We have had quite a few entries online so far, so we can certainly help you out with how to get the online version to work.
The survey offers 2 options in North Ruckle. One is a complete buyout, and that means that everybody has to move. The other one is build a new dike, which is going to run right through certain homes, and so for some of the folks that live down there, neither option works. I just want to find out, I'd like to know if maybe an option, I think it's option B, is build a dike. Would the city kind of work with people, like if we wanted, we might vote for the dike, but we're right on the dike. We're gonna lose our home. What about helping people? Then that want to leave can leave. You buy them out, you know. But then that want to stay, maybe it's like an option C almost, where you're helping folks to stay. Well, yeah, swapping properties kind of thing, like Linda Pierce would like to stay. She's right on the river. But there's 2 properties right behind her who I think are gonna want buyouts. Why not buy those out so you own the property and then swap with Linda and help her move her house back so she can stay. She's got a home there. Otherwise, I think you're gonna wind up with some homeless people. Nora and I, we've got a fair amount of property there. Now we're right in the line of the new dike too. Nothing against the new dike except it's gonna ruin our home. Well, if we had a little help picking up our house and moving it back onto our own property, then maybe we could stay. And you might find similar stories throughout North and South Ruckle, and maybe Johnson Flats too, I don't know. But rather than just making it a hard line, it's this or that, maybe you could kind of somehow work to put the 2 options together so that them that want to stay can stay, and you're going to wind up with, well, a happy neighborhood. Yeah. I should have let Nora speak. It's really her idea. I'm just her mouthpiece. But something like that, anyway.
Thank you for the question. That's excellent. I know we've discussed this and we've put some thought to kind of the decision and the considerations, and then how this could work if that's the direction of council. So ultimately, the decision comes down to 3 big factors, and it's hard to optimize them all. But the first one is reduction of risk. And so what is an acceptable level of risk given that any dike in the future at some point could fail? And so if you do a combination of structural protection like a dike plus raising of homes, raising of infrastructure, so different pieces like that, and if the community decides that's an acceptable level of risk, then that it could fall down on that side. I think risk needs to be assessed really carefully in all of the options, and even after council's decision, there's further work that needs to be done about risk, but it's a major consideration conceptually. The second one is cost effectiveness, right? And so people have talked about the cost of buying out the entire neighborhood versus the cost of putting in a Skookum setback dike and still having residents able to be there. And actually both options, a really key part of it is replacement homes, because we can't build anything until we've got new options for people, options that respect the wishes of where they ultimately would like to be, depending, of course, if it's feasible at that location. And that's the third aspect, and Kevin actually really enlightened me about this piece, is that in supporting options and desires, there's an aspect of empowerment, there's an aspect of responsibility and accountability, that the community, individuals, residents have a choice. And so balancing their interests, their requests, with that 100-year time perspective of the community as a whole, risk reduction over time, cost-effective solutions, and options that are best able to be there. I think what you're suggesting with the option B of a dike and partial buyout, relocation of homes within, or construction of new ones within for those folks that want to stay, because some of those homes are not in a condition to be rebuilt, raised, or removed. They're too far gone. So there's going to be some empty lots and some wiggle room. I think it's a good suggestion for that option.
Just further to that, if you do it that way, if we do it that way, what you wind up with, or what you could wind up with, is a neighborhood that is protected by, as you say, a Skookum dike, where, property values, for one thing, could eventually go up instead of down. It could become an attractive place to live. People, if I was a government cat, if I was with the provincial government and it landed on my desk, right, that the city of Grand Forks wants to work with people and help them in this way, it's more like this. It isn't just one big problem that needs a big solution. It's how many small problems that need close-up examination. And if the city's willing to take the time to work with us one-on-one and make sure everybody's landed where they want to land, as close as possible. Well, if I was that government cat and that landed on my desk, I'd be saying that's where I want to retire, because there's a council that works with its citizens, right, and cares about them. It's not just one big problem that needs one big solution. It's a few hundred problems here. I feel myself, I'm getting nervous because I feel like I'm talking to the people who are deciding my fate here. Right? 28 years we've been in that house. My family goes back into the 30s in this valley, and I might have to leave, is what I'm being told. Because even if I get top dollar for our house, I don't think I'll be able to afford anything else in this valley. So we're already looking at properties as far away as Nova Scotia that we think we might be able to afford. So, but it could be a great little neighborhood, full of artists, full of color, full of life. And so, yeah.
I hear your concerns, Dave. And were I in your situation, any of your situations, I would probably be feeling the same way. We have made, as a council, an effort to meet with those affected communities and to meet with you. I don't think we have the luxury of time really to be able to sit with each of you one-on-one. I mean, if we were able to do that, that would be wonderful. But I don't think we have that kind of time. We are approaching winter. We need to get some funding sources available to assist you, and you, and you. And we want you to work with us. These surveys that we are asking you to complete is your opportunity to put your thoughts down, exactly like Dave, or whatever your other thoughts are, so that we can consider them. We want to make a decision. We want to make the right decision. We want to make an informed decision. And we want to make a decision that we believe will be in your best interests. And as I say, your safety, your security, your health, all of these things are very important to council. But we have to get started on this. We have to be able to get these grants in so that we can come back to you and say, based on this decision, we've submitted the grant, and hopefully we will get money sooner rather than later to offer some assistance. And I hear your concerns about your homes. I share that. The city's got some properties that could be available to relocate people. And if perhaps, and I don't know the age of your home, but maybe some of your homes could be moved. I know that years ago when the airport was built where it is, and people were bought out and their homes were moved. So that might be an option that could be considered as well. So please work with us and give us your thoughts and so that we can make the best possible decision.
Thank you for that. My name is Chantal Savard. I bought a property by the Omega restaurant, so probably it won't be usable. So while the flood was happening, I bought another 18.9 acres on Granby Road and Sand Creek. In fact, Sand Creek is on my property. So if this helps, I'm asking for support and help somehow. That I was applying for an RV. It's zoned for an RV park, except you can only keep the people 3 months, so it's not helping very much. So if I can have some support and somehow to set up this RV park perhaps as a mobile home park or tiny home park or somewhere where people could relocate. My husband just passed away a few months ago, and I know that's what he would like to do. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. So that would be a question that our planning department would be able to field and help you navigate what that process looks like in terms of the time frames and the length of the duration of stay, basically, for those sorts of criteria. So I'm happy to talk with you afterwards and get your contact there.
Okay, I think I'm next. I've got the mic. Quick comment first is that the straw poll at those individual meetings, I hope that you just, doesn't make any sense because all kinds of people weren't affected by the flood, for instance, in South Ruckle, so they don't bother going to the meetings. They want to stay. You should, all of us, there's a whole bunch of us, hardly go to any meetings because everything's fine, except for us with severe erosion. The next thing, if on the questionnaire, we handed, or I did anyway on Monday, my problems with that questionnaire, it was addressed to the male of the household. Yeah. You guys could laugh even louder, you know. You got that, did you? All right. I photocopied it and put in my opinion as well. And I hope everybody else, all the other women did the same thing? Good. Next, there was no code on it, on the questionnaire, so I handed it in without that, and I wasn't told until I got there that it should have had the code, but she took it anyway. Is that one even going to be read without the code on it? What?
I think Kevin Gates, who is behind you, will be the one to answer your question.
So one of the advantages of being a small town is that I recognized your handwriting. It's true because you stapled on letters on paper on the back, and there was one from you and one about your neighboring property.
Our house is
So in your particular case, yes. But please do include that question in our code. That was one of the design flaws, is we put the code on the front page but not the back page. So that's just the way it is right now. If you do it online, of course, you have to put the code in.
Without any name, you even know me. All right. Now, the water pipeline that you guys, the city put in. So that conflicts with where this dike is. The red line is on there. So I'm trying to figure out what on earth is going on with that red line when it crosses over the dike and goes through the Trans-Canada Trail, which we love to no end.
It's a great question. So the dike locations identified in the neighborhood maps are entirely conceptual, so no detailed engineering to say exactly where they should go. It's a concept that there's a setback of at least 20 meters from the design, but many individual variations in topography, in particular on the South Ruckle area. The neighborhood opinion, of course, is it doesn't need to go as far south as was indicated because the height of land, where the water came in, etc. And likewise, concerning the alignment with the trail, use of the trail potentially as part of the dike, connection in with the railroad, drainage, all of those details would be done in the next year detailed design. Right now, the concept is permanent dike in South Ruckle combined with drainage works to allow relief of water and some very low-lying areas to be considered for buyout. That's basically the approach that would be taken. For those that are along the edge, we are looking hard at that erosion bank protection window and looking at options there. So, it's flagged in our system. We have, looking for options right away and both kind of what can we do now and what can we do in emergency protection measures. We know that concerns your site and a few other homes there.
Okay, you and Kevin tonight. That's okay. I'm liking what I hear. Okay, I think I'm liking what I hear from you. Not sure.
Yeah, my question is to the city. I keep hearing about relocation and we have property and all the rest. Do you already have funding for the infrastructure for all that? And if you have all this land ready and available to relocate some people or all the people, where is it?
We would be working with our staff. The city, if you look at the maps, we own quite a bit of property. And we would want to develop that if that were the choice. And so that you would still have the services, that water, sewer, power, that you have. No.
Well, where I live, I have a beautiful spot right on the river. And I think it's irreplaceable. Would you be swapping land for land, or are you going to talk money? And if so, how do you come up with a value? I think I heard there's going to be some kind of appraisal or assessment going around. Are we going to get shafted by expropriation, or are we going to have enough money to do something with?
The last choice for the city would be expropriation. That is an ugly process. When I worked for the city, we were involved in one. And it would be hopefully that if the decision is made to purchase your properties, it would be negotiated. We would be advocating to get sufficient funding to purchase those properties at pre-flood market value, plus whatever expenditures you've incurred to bring your homes up so that you could live in it. So I really hope, and I'm going to suggest to all of you, if you've done any improvements after the flood to your homes, I hope you please, please, please keep your receipts, because those are necessary.
Okay, just an added to that one. With the dike moving and where the dike's located in my property, I don't think we have a choice. It looks like it's right over or through my house or whatever. But I have issues with whoever. I talked to numerous people in the last while. I haven't gotten a phone call back from anyone suggesting that they're on it or they're going to be over next week. I have a dike that runs right under my back door. I have a whack of gravel that they put on top of the dike that's constantly coming in the house on my new floor. I have what I would call danger areas to deal with. I've talked to the city and I've talked to others, and I'm not hearing anybody phone me back and say, yeah, we'll be there next week, or give us a couple hours, or next month, or anything. And I think that's really, really poor response. I believe I have a very valid concern with the impact or the liability issues and the mess that was left because of it. The dike being gravel instead of the bladder, which they suggested, and I agreed to in the beginning. I come home to find out a whole bunch of gravel all over the place. And now we're having to deal with that. I suggested something like landscape fabric or imitation turf or something, just to give us something to walk on so it doesn't come in the house. I haven't got any response. People would nod their head and say, yeah, but nobody's phoning me, said it's ordered or we'll be there next week.
No, I hear your concerns. I don't know who you have been speaking to. I don't know if the flood recovery team has any involvement in that. It's more about response. I don't know who you've been talking to, if you've been talking to City Hall or the flood recovery team or Public Works. But that is, that no one's gotten back to you with any kind of response is unacceptable, and it's certainly something that we will be looking into.
So I'm going to slip in a quick answer to a question here that probably should have been on the 20 questions from last night, but we'll call it 21 questions from last night. And that was about the temporary flood protection works that were done this year, in terms of are we gonna leave them in where on the end of 5th Street and in North Ruckle. And so Council approved, or at least agreed to send the financial plan amendment to the council meeting for the next level of approval for funding for those repairs. So the answer is yes, we will be either leaving the temporary repairs in place if an engineer says that they're safe, or we will be repairing those spots of the dike that were damaged during the 2018 flood event.
Does that adequately respond to your concerns? I hear you.
Hi, sorry, a couple of questions. What does winter housing look like? Everyone keeps telling us that we are conducting surveys, that we are wanting to come up with winter housing for everyone, and I think that's great. What is winter, what are you guys looking at for winter housing? Is this ATCO trailers, like what we saw when I lived up north, and it's 100 bedrooms with communal kitchens and living rooms? Is it rehousing people in rental units that are already owned by individuals, you know, basement suites, that sort of thing? And what about those of us that have animals that would have to move with? Would that be acceptable? I mean, what does that look like? I think that would help alleviate a lot of the anxiety and uncertainty everyone is feeling.
Sure, so I'll start with that, and then I might actually tap our consultant here on this as well, Lee Prevost from Urban Matters. But just briefly, the replacement housing for any that aren't able to be repaired, or for those where a repair timeline, a rebuild timeline is into next year. The housing outreach has identified the number, household size, various things like that, and we've been communicating with province about getting funding in place for all those options. We have identified the possibilities of rehousing through rentals, as you've anticipated, and are looking at a program there, as well as there's some opportunity with some new stock as well coming in. I think the ATCO trailers, that aspect of emergency housing is the least desirable for a lot of people, but if the stock that comes in and the rental stock retail, or the rental stock available is not enough, all options will be on the table. If we can pass it over to you to Lee as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I would add more than that. Essentially to say that outside of ATCO trailers, which I agree aren't the best solutions in these cases, everything else is on the table. Option. Right? Everything else is on the table. Ideally, existing stock, unused basement suites, unused houses, unused suites and rooms, but everything else beyond, a lot of anything that's movable that we can bring in, anything that gets people to be able to stay on their properties if those properties aren't being bought out. We're looking at trying to keep people in their communities, help them reestablish those communities and rebuild their houses, and that's really the prime focus. As far as you asked the question about pets, pets are something we are, in any situation where we're identifying potential housing solutions as well as existing ones in the community, we are asking if pets would be allowed. It's on our radar to make sure that there is some available.
And Mr. Mann, who are you before you hand the mic off?
Sorry, my name is Lee Prevo. I'm with Urban Matters. We are one of the consultants that have come in to help create a long-term, short-term and long-term housing solution for the community. And I would add that through the RTPAB, we have funding now to bring in a permanent person who we hope will be starting in the next week or two. So you will have a constant person who's working on the long-term recovery plan for the community here.
Awesome, thank you, Lee. Part 2 of that question is, there are those of us who are working really hard to work on our house, that's where my husband and I are at. With the DFA money, if we do all of the work ourselves and are very, very economical in our spending, it will be just enough to repair our home and make it livable again. The question is there is no room in that money for hiring help, so it's my husband and I doing the work, and whenever my parents can come over and assist us. Is there anything being looked at in, you know, if we had assistance, physical labor assistance in doing that, we wouldn't have to be housed over winter. We could be into our home. Is that being looked at in any way?
Thank you. That issue has been identified. We know with the level of assessment, level of damage, and payout from the DFA, a lot of people are stretched really thin or unable to get the work done. So where the lack of resources affects your housing timeline, as expressed through the survey, those needs are identified, and it's definitely part of the request to get additional support. One of the real challenges, as you also identify, is getting help. The contractors that are here are, I think, stretched thin. There's not enough contractors who have come to town.
For sure, my brother works for one of the companies and he hasn't had a day off in about 3 months.
Exactly. So I think we might need to see if there's some other novel solutions there, but I know that the volunteer sector is engaged, and there's going to be more help coming in the new year. I think maybe see if there's some more support this fall as well. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. You're welcome.
Okay, I've got 2 questions. And this sort of tags on to the last question that was asked about temporary housing. So some of us are living in travel trailers on our properties, and that's going to have to continue for part of the winter or most of the winter. So the extension of the HEAP program, whatever form that takes, I'm wondering what form that is going to take. Is it going to take the form of cash, like more money that would help us, or, you know, are we talking about actual physical temporary housing? Are we talking about money for some of us? Like for me, for example, that extension of the HEAP program in the form of money would help me to get through the next few months and provide me with temporary housing rather than, you know, actual physical housing. So what form do we know what form the extension of the HEAP program is going to take?
We don't know the form. The need has been identified and the request extended, and I believe there's something being worked on, but there's been no details about what it is. So I think the next round of HEAP, the application process, the needs identified through the various components, that's really, really important information, and that will inform what October looks like and November and beyond.
Okay, so identify our temporary housing needs. We need cash, we need contractors, we need a place to stay, so that should be coming in our surveys. That's what you're saying. Okay, perfect. And do you know when you'll know that?
No, we haven't heard about a timeline yet.
Okay. Okay, so the next question is just to get clarification on the proposal that's going to the province, the one that you guys are going to reveal to us on September the 4th. So what pieces of this undertaking are included in that proposal? Is temporary housing included in that proposal? Are temporary flood protection measures included in that proposal? Or is it just for the long-term aspect? So like, what all is that proposal entailing? What pieces of this puzzle?
there's two parts. So there's a major funding request and support scope request that's already gone in for temporary works, for housing support, for all that piece of it. That need is there regardless of what the long-term option is. The long-term option is essentially what council's role here is looking at what is the future land use of these areas and how do we meet people's needs and transitioning into that future. So I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, but the big request is currently being discussed in detail at the province, and they're working on all the kinds of solutions that we've been advocating for, and I think we're just working on details.
And Jennifer, I would also ask that we've got an asking to the province right now, but we've made it real abundantly clear to them on several occasions, this is not the only ask. There's many more coming. We're already forming up another one here before too long. There's additional personnel staffing needs. We've already sort of mentioned earlier on this post-heap needs, those sorts of things. There's going to be a whole bunch of work that needs to be done around trying to figure out what the scope and design might be that would be recommended for whatever the solutions are going to be as well. So there's just a lot of stuff that has to happen. So there'll be several asks.
Okay, perfect. That clarifies a lot. And I guess to add on to that, I'm wondering, once the big ask is done, for the 2 to 4 year program that we're looking at, how much flexibility are you guys going to have once you get the money? How much flexibility are you going to have to continue with public consultation and work with individuals like Dave, for example? How much flexibility will you guys have for individual situations?
That's an excellent question. So that need has been critically identified. Part of the additional personnel support needed is a concept of caseworkers. So for anybody who's in a situation likely where they're going to have to be moving or have complex recovery needs on their site, case managers that deal with the housing replacement, that deal with connecting them with additional services, with counseling if needed, etc. There's a few positions explicitly there. I just want to address briefly on the rural side. There's already been a case manager position approved for specific sites that are affected by major river erosion, and they're really complex questions. There's also additional engineering analysis around those sites. So that kind of process has been initiated in the rural area for specific properties. We're looking at a parallel at a much larger scale, but wanting to make sure that you have someone to always talk to who knows your file and says, who'll know how to follow up. Okay, you had an insurance issue. What's next after that one? Who have that continuity? So we want to have a continuity of care for sure.
Okay, thank you. So I'm getting the message that it's really important that we get specific on those surveys about our individual needs, both temporary and on a long-term basis.
Yeah, and actually the housing and needs assessment survey that identified the various needs that Rachel Warner's team has been deploying, you can check in if there's been a change or an increased need. It's really important that we know where you're at right now with things. So definitely check in with Rachel's team for an update to that, and we'll get it up there, and that will be able to help assign you to where the next steps are. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
My name is Lynn Peterson, and I live in the condo beside City Park, and I have what is probably a very dumb question, but I'm needing a lot of reassurance. How written in stone is that little map that came with the survey with the berm behind, between us and the river, rather than having that berm moved to between us and Home Hardware? I need a lot of reassurance.
So recalling what I said before about it being very conceptual and requiring additional analysis, the concept for the downtown flood protection was as much of downtown as possible, in particular higher density or core commercial, right? So with the condominiums and apartments closer to the river, what is the feasibility of placing it between there. It can't be a standard dike that has a really big runway on either side. There's site-specific design that would need to be done. So the assurance is that recognizing the importance of the higher density areas in the immediate downtown area as being really, really very hard to replace and move out, etc. That's being considered, and the engineers will be looking at that solution in their work this winter.
So you're saying that it's very probable that dike will be between us and the river?
The word that I heard from the engineers is it's a good investment. It's worth the cost benefit to work on that one.
You made my night better. Thank you.
My name is Neil Gillespie. As per the conversation I had this morning with Pete Ritchie, my father, Bill Gillespie, Pete Somerville, I'm requesting a copy of the minutes from this meeting and previous meetings. 30 years of this house, basically unaffected by the flood. Option 1 does not work. Option 2 does not work. As far as the value of my home, that's to be said. Nobody's even came and looked at it. Don't know where you can put me. Somebody's gonna need some deep pockets. So, we need an option C. I believe this man here nailed it. Fix what's broken. Those that want to buy out, buy them out. Those that don't, don't.
And I would encourage you to include that in your survey.
Paper wasn't big enough.
Add more.
Many more pages.
I'll pick up a new one.
We have some notes being taken here. Some of them are my chicken scroll. I think we'll have some summary available, but I believe this is also being recorded, the whole scene, so I think.
I'm going to get it across the back.
Hi there, I'm Courtney Redding. I'm very nervous with the microphone. Some of you have probably heard my name. I've been a squeaky wheel trying to get some answers. Jesse and I live on Edwards Road, and we don't really fit into any of these categories. We had a gray placard for 3 months that we had to fight about. Our house is a tear down, and DFA declined our application and our appeal for our business, and they still haven't been down for our home application. Even if they do, it's assessed at $13,000. We want to know if there's any conversation with people like us that we have nothing and we don't know how to rebuild. We have beautiful land to rebuild on that's right next to a wonderful neighbor, but no means to do that. Is there any conversation for people like us?
Thanks. This has been, it's an identified conversation that we've been having since the very beginning in terms of recognizing that the way that the DFA system is structured is to fix things that were uninsurable losses and to provide an offset to those damages for those homeowners. And there are a great number of people, yourself included, that it doesn't work well for. And that conversation, we've had that conversation again very quickly after the event. We started having those conversations with the provincial representatives. My sense is, so yes is the easy answer to your question. We've had lots of those conversations. The challenge is I don't know that there is a good answer to help people like you guys. And so we're still looking, and those conversations are still going on. But I don't know what those avenues are at this point that are going to bear fruit to help. And Graham may have some more insight.
Sure. So there's several rural properties we've identified where there's farm animals and residents, the replacement residents needs to be on site. And so especially where The DFA, because the assessment was so low, has no way to even get started on a new dwelling. We're looking at those special circumstances housing funding requests, and Lee and Matt at Urban Matters definitely have that under their wing in the housing plan. It's different than providing replacement housing within the city somewhere, and the timeline is critical because, like others, being in an inadequate RV is not sustainable even right now, and you're looking at what's available in the next month or 2 here. So we definitely are aware of the situation and a few others, and we're looking for those solutions on that part.
We are very hard workers, and we are willing to, if there was even any lending available to move forward, but we can't go to the bank and get a construction mortgage with our situation right now or anything like that. But I mean, we're prepared to work with someone if someone's there to talk to us. And I appreciate your question.
And the credit union is of no help to anybody anyway, so no point even going on.
Well, it started, we were grade. She applied for the HEAP program. So from the time it took her to drive from Red Cross to our house, which is 10 minutes, no one came out and assessed our property, and all of a sudden when she got home, she got a call that we were changed to yellow. So, and then finally, someone from the regional district showed up yesterday for about 2 hours.
Thank you, Rachel.
And actually told us we were forgotten about. DFA hasn't even come to our house yet. And all these other people are working on their house and getting ready for winter and trying to do the best they can. We've spent 15 grand on an RV. We both work every day. Plus we're trying to start a small farm. Rebuild a small farm. And we're forgotten about. And then you guys have these proposed dikes through town. And what's that going to affect our land now? No one's come to us to say, okay, we're going to propose this dike. No one's come, no one's even showed up.
We're not in a survey.
We're not, yeah, nothing. So like, you guys gotta get your shit together here a little bit.
I certainly understand where you come from, and I appreciate, but I need to push back a little bit on the fact that you've been forgotten about, because that's not the case. The challenge is trying to figure out how best to move forward and come up with solutions that are going to be most productive for all of us in some way, right? For quality of life, balancing those things like Graham mentioned in terms of risk and everything else. We know the DFA system. The DFA system is not built to fix the sorts of things that this event has laid upon us, right? The DFA system is meant to provide those insurable losses or uninsurable losses back to some state. It doesn't work for situations like this. It doesn't work well for agricultural producers, right? Across the board, I haven't heard anybody that said, you know, this DFA thing really saved us for our farm. So the challenge is trying to figure out how do we come up with creative solutions to help people, and I think that's in large part why we've been putting so much work into this. You know, the questions that came up earlier as well about flexibility and creativity. The ATCO trailers are a really simple solution. The reason that we don't have a bunch of ATCO trailers here is because we know it's a bad solution too, right? So we're trying to figure out how to navigate this process to help people, and you haven't been forgotten. It's just that we don't have any good solution for you.
Have conversations with them. That's what they're feeling like they haven't been spoken.
Yeah, I made many phone calls and sent many emails.
No one gets back to
No one
us.
responded till Rachel did.
No one gets back to us.
And I don't have time for it.
Actually, I also do want to push back. Absolutely. No, there's definitely callbacks and the housing survey as well. So.
Okay, so my question here, what about the people that are in the downtown section? Hi. Didn't even seem like there was going to be any buyout offered. Does that relate to only principal residences, or does it relate to businesses as well? The other thing is about the dike. I hear it's got to be 30 meters back from the river. the starting point of the dike and how wide would the dike be? And if that's the case, it's going to be encroaching into the front end of my property, which closes off the road in front of my house. And all of a sudden I can't get into my attached garage anymore. And if I have a back lane, I'm supposed to be okay with it? Or is that like, are not expropriating by doing that to me? And so those are my concerns. And I need foundation repairs in the amounts of tens of thousands of dollars. And like Courtney, my assessed value is peanuts. So I'm going to get so little from DFA. And am I supposed to be investing these tens of thousands of dollars lifting up a house which is 120 years old? And you can build a dike as high as this building if you want. It's not going to stop the groundwater from coming up under my house. So I'm screwed either way. What do? I want to get out of there.
So the first part is the location and alignment of the dike. It's not a final design, it's just an initial concept. In locations where a road exists, instead of having a 30-meter dike set back on the inside of the road or set back on the side of the road 30 meters from the river, that's not feasible in a lot of places like downtown. As you get down Riverside towards the Forks, there's more room, but these site-specific details are not at all worked out. So, you know, just hold on until that detailed work happens this spring. There will be further consultation.
So don't fix my foundation before winter, which is partly ripped open right now from the groundwater, and I'm waiting to fix my structure. My floors are falling in, the house is tipping.
And that's a different question, right? So structural issues, definitely working with the building department, looking at what your options are there. But if the priority for houses that were damaged is if they are repairable to state to be habitable this winter, safe, warm, and dry, because the timeline before you know, the final alignment and the construction down the road, you know, we don't want to lose a house that could be repaired. So that's why it's just kind of holding tight a little bit on those locations. I don't know if you can add anything else about that.
But then once again, I've got the groundwater issue. So as high as you build a dike, it won't stop me from flooding again.
Debbie, can you just add that that's north of Central on Riverside? Because I don't think that they understand.
Yeah, I think that's north of number 3.
North of Central.
Yep.
Your home is north of Central?
Riverside, north of Central.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was thinking another location. I don't know. I would think that if there is an issue and a dike were to be built, and it impacted negatively your property, you would be consulted. There wouldn't be anything done without you know, consulting with you and letting you know what the requirements would be and what the issues are. And I think that goes with anybody that is going to be impacted by a dike, that would be discussed with you, and so made you aware of what the issues would be. So I don't want to make sweeping statements and promises that we can't keep. Only that before anything were to be done like that in an area that's outside of the downtown core up Riverside, and I know that there have been issues there, and I hear what you're saying, is that consultation needs to happen.
Yeah, my name is Vern Walsh. I live on Riverside Avenue, down by the Danville border. And I'm wondering if the recovery team has given any consideration into helping us to protect our homes for the future. There's only 5 of us down there, but 4 out of 5 of us were adversely affected by the flood. So I'm wondering where we're at in that regard.
Hi, Vern. Yeah, so you know, as we spoke about before, I think part of what you're looking at is your question is about whether there's going to be diking assistance basically for your property. Is that right?
Yes, that's part of it.
Yeah. So again, that's, you know, the notion is that we need to have, as elected officials, we need to have the expert advice or information to make a decision about where those high-risk areas are. And that's based on balancing a bunch of those competing kind of criteria that Graham talked about earlier as well. So, you know, I haven't seen any information to date that means that there's any likely diking projects that would take place in an area like that. If we got an engineer, if the hydrological assessment came back and said, you know, this is clearly a high risk area and there needs to be some protection in multiple properties here, then we would be entertaining those conversations. The other piece that I think that you were interested in that we talked about was the kind of coordination among different landowners to put together applications for such things as placing dikes, and that would be a question that I would direct over to Christina or Jim. So I would encourage that you make that connection with her before leaving.
Good, good, good. So to date, we haven't seen anybody, we haven't talked to anybody, but I'll certainly be talking to this lady shortly. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Earl. I live out in the nursery. I'm wondering which one of you would be able to talk to me about my house and my location. Nobody's returned a phone call.
Well, maybe, so you've left messages, and has there been phone tag been happening, or?
Nothing. No, I'm just wondering, who will I talk to?
Okay. So I think we could follow up offline at the end of the conversation. You can talk with me and then also with Rachel if there's a housing specific need. Is your concern around erosion or the river flow across the property in their area, or is it about the damaged house? Or?
Just whether or not I can rebuild. I'll talk to you later.
Stop smiling. Elena McCorduck from Almond Gardens. We are talking about surveys in town. Will we as rural people will have a survey to go through, and will we consider this our needs and our questions, because it's all about town. And another thing, HIP, because last time when the HIP came in order, I fought whole months until I actually started receiving the money. If continuation of the HIP, will we get help with rent? Because I can't be in my house and I'm renting a place in town. As also you guys know, I don't have any income and I can't go in the house. Like, will I still continue receiving help?
Yeah, so the continued request for help has been noted and identified where the replacement housing is still not adequate or not available. So in one form or another, every one of those cases where people aren't back in their home, we'll be looking at what the resources are that they need and following up. And I'll just speak in terms of, do you want to speak about the case management component here? So the regional district properties like yours are so site specific. The solutions are very site specific. They don't apply to a whole neighborhood. They might apply to one house or 3 houses. And so the follow-up work is going to be one-on-one with you, with a case worker who's connected with the planning department and the RDKB and the recovery team. We know that the options that are available for you are, it's kind of spend a bunch of money doing this with concerns and consequences, spend a bunch of money doing that with concerns and consequences. You need individual support and navigation through the options. And the other question is making sure that the engineering works that could be used to support any homes that are adjacent to the river and falling in, etc., that they really work and with full understanding of the river. So we've received additional support to help in those regards. So I don't know if there's anything you could add.
Just on to the your question about the survey piece. So my understanding is, the survey in large part is in place to help the flood recovery team provide the best information possible for the City of Grand Forks for their land use planning decisions, right? This is separate from some of the other pieces. So that particular piece of what that outcome of the surveys, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. So for a lot of the rural areas, the land use decisions are very, very different in terms of what we're faced with. And as Graham says, they're more site-specific, more unique. And so that would be direct communication, either with our planning department, with that case manager that you would have, or with myself if you aren't getting those answers.
Okay, and for the HIP, do we need to re-register it, or we are still on the file?
It's all still on file.
Yeah, so I think your original information, if you applied and received it, is on file, but I think you have to reapply when the next announcement comes out. I don't personally know what that process is, but I can't imagine you'll have to resubmit all of your information again. I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Alina Konevsky. I'm the manager for the Red Cross. Hi. My name is Alina. I'm the manager of the Red Cross in Grand Forks, just for the process of the HEAP. So we have everybody that's received HEAP in the past has an email on file. We send you that email with the survey. No. Okay. So everybody that has received HEAP through an e-transfer, we have your email address on file, so you all get an automatic email that instructs you to complete another survey. So we have, we're going into the 3rd month, so we do a little bit of a different survey every time to get a bit more information. But all your information, all your details, everything is there. That's certainly not changed, and that will remain for any potential extension. And as the regional district said, it's just discussions at this point, but we are very much aware about the need for housing and the need for people who are unable to return home and have been unable to find long-term solutions. So we're very much having those discussions. And then everybody that, it wasn't an e-transfer, it was any other method of payment, we call you and ask you to complete that survey either by coming into us or doing it on the phone. And if you feel that you're eligible and you haven't heard from us, please come and talk to us. We are in the basement of the Legion. We plan to be there for another couple months at least, and we'd love having you come down.
Sorry, one more question. I realized I forgot to introduce myself last time. I'm Luna. I live in South Ruckle. My husband and I have been there for about a year. We voted for the buyout. For us, that was the most practical option. We bought this house planning to only be in it for a couple of years. Flip, update, buy something else in the area. We love this area. I have a question about the diking. For a lot of our neighbors, they want a dike, they want to stay. These houses they've been in for years, this is their home. I understand that the dike where it's set is only proposed. I understand that and all of that. My question is about the bank. A lot of the bank throughout the flooding has been eroded and washed away. You know, there were sheds that sat in the middle of people's yard that are now right on the edge. Is there anything, or is the bank going to be armored so that that doesn't continue to wash away? Obviously, if it was to continue washing away, the dike would fall into the river. That's just how gravity and physics works. Are we looking at armoring the bank when and if dikes are put into place to prevent or to be able to maintain these dikes and have them last longer?
Yeah, so the specific design hasn't been done, but the engineers are very aware of the erosion on that stretch between the beach and the trail, and have proposed solutions to hold the line and prevent it from migrating inland. As the neighbor there, Muriel mentioned, the water line runs down the trail and right behind that site, and as well as houses, roads, other infrastructure. So, you know, whatever the exact alignment of the dike, holding the existing river edge stable is a key part of it. We know there is urgency in that area because of how quickly it's been eroding, and so we're looking at interim and permanent measures and trying to get something done as quickly as can be done. Try to get something done as quickly as we can.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having these. And thank you guys for having these question periods at the end of the meetings. I think it makes a lot of us feel addressed and included in the solution and not just left out.
And thank you for all the work. You guys must be putting in an incredible number of hours.
Hello. My talk? Okay, my name is Linda Galloway. I live in South Ruckle. Our house was not touched by floodwaters, but we are in the area of the buyout. And so my question is, I've been here a long time. I was born here, so I'm pretty familiar with the rivers and what areas flood first. The option for the buyout is to remove all the residents, so that gives way for the floodwaters, correct?
So the preliminary concept is that areas where the floodwaters flowed or were standing 8 to 12 feet, above the ground level, are really challenging places to have houses. For those that were outside of the area that had deep water, it may be entirely suitable to have them remain and be protected from erosion from the dike and shoreline protection. So there hasn't been any line drawn about where buyouts would happen for certain, but the first thing that basically has been identified by Don Dobson and the other engineers that the very, very low line areas where the water stood for so long. I know some of the folks that, yeah, exactly, the slug of doom, because it kind of looked like a slug in the shape. It wraps around the low-lying area of land. That area is what would be under consideration if residential, if the option of not having a buyout in South Ruckle, of doing a dike, if that's what's recommended, then it'd be basically the most at-risk low-lying sites that were heavily impacted. So for those neighbors, residents who weren't heavily or only lightly impacted, or maybe even where a lifting of a house or a change in the foundation would be a suitable alternative, that's been identified as likely the most cost-effective solution for those sites.
So how come Johnson's Flats, who usually floods before, well, South Ruckle would have never flooded if the bank did not erode. How come Johnson's Flats don't have the buyout option? Because the water raises there first, before North Ruckle and South Ruckle.
The question about Johnson Flats is a really good one. So actually the very low-lying areas of Johnson Flats that flood regularly, and particularly where there's flooding from the river as well as from the wetland, are under consideration by the engineers for that assessment. In other areas where the floodwaters were relatively high and forming a channel across the land and affecting houses, likewise. In other spots, we're looking at the elevation of 12th Street so that emergency responders can get in and help with rescues. Of course, that was lost. And for houses that were only slightly affected, the option of raising or site level protection is what's being considered. So buyout definitely in high-risk areas. Anywhere there's high-risk areas, regular flooding are all identified. Absolutely.
But to my understanding, the buyout wasn't an option for the Johnson's Flats. They get their house raised.
It actually is in the letter. It doesn't say option 1 or option 2. There's just one for your have a bunch of possibilities.
Yeah. It's not a major difference in land use options between, like with North Ruckle, there's the biggest difference between having a setback dike or removing a large chunk of the neighborhood. In Johnson Flats, a wraparound dike for the semi-rural area wasn't indicated as being feasible and cost-effective. That site-specific erosion and berming was suitable, and that buyout of high-risk areas was suitable. So that's identified in the solutions.
And sorry, one last question. So with you guys coming up with the buyout option, I'm sure you've tallied up what the estimated cost would be to buy out everybody's house if everybody took that option? And what would that estimated cost be?
We've looked at assessment values, and that's an inadequate piece because it's a bit of a shotgun approach. We don't have the total numbers in front of us because it depends entirely on where that line is drawn of highest impact. it's certainly in the order of many millions of dollars as our diking option. So that's why the costs are being weighed. In the report that council will be considering, the very high level costs are included. So I think we'll be able to share more information going forward. But until we kind of have the detailed line of where it makes most sense to have buyout, it's tough to talk costs until then.
So how are we supposed to make this decision, or these decisions, without having all the information?
It's a good question, because right now the information is imperfect all around, right? We don't know ultimately what everything that's fundable. If a buyout is appropriate for a house that you happen to be in, how would that affect you? Alternatively, if it wasn't, if you were to remain, how would that affect you? That's what we're looking for. What support would you need if that were to be? What impacts do we need to consider in the buyout? That's really important. So, issues with irreplaceability of aspects of property, those kind of things.
Yeah, excuse me. Council will be advocating if the option is decided upon for a buyout, is to get you every dollar that we can. We are going to be advocating for pre-flood market value plus what you have put in as far as repairs go.
But that's not going to be enough to buy another property anywhere else in this valley.
Well, that is something that please include that in your survey, and that is something that we will have a look at and consider, because I mean that's a very good point. Thank you for raising that.
And that's actually been identified in the housing plan that the cost of construction vary very much from the existing value of homes, and how do we support people and meet the resources where they're at, and provide alternative options. So that's definitely in the long-range housing plan that Urban Matters is working on.
Hi, I'm Nancy Leach. I'm in Johnson Flats. Most of my question was answered from the last question about Johnson Flats. But I was wondering, is that area considered site-specific?
Can you clarify what you mean by site-specific?
Well, as far as the dike goes, and you're saying the specific ones rather than included.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a map in my presentation showing it, but there's places in Johnson Flats where the river's either scouring or it's pouring in, and those sites would be have been identified, and options are being presented for preventing those in typical floods. In other parts of Johnson Flats where the river regularly runs, the engineers have the analysis of all the water depth and that kind of thing. They're going to model what's most at risk, and that's areas where a buyout can definitely be considered. It's site-specific as opposed to a large wraparound dike.
Right. So should we be expecting somebody coming to consult with us then?
Absolutely. There will be work ongoing in the fall and winter as we go through. It'll happen parcel by parcel, and everyone in an affected area would be consulted.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Donna Semenoff. I was in the flood and talking for people in Johnson Flats. We're talking about Johnson Flats already. So at the Johnson Flats meeting, the dike was a possibility, but since it's being taken away and there's one option just to raise homes, and unless certain properties are said to be not safe. With raising the road, and I'm not sure how far down south you're thinking of doing it, or maybe the way the river went, it could create a barrier, like a dam that actually puts more pressure against certain houses. So I'm kind of curious about what your thoughts are on especially southern Johnson Flats, below the avenue there. And I also wanted to, I think you already know that the Johnson Flats residents did not know the deadline date on their form. And I'm wondering, were the rural residents in Johnson Flats not given a form? Was it just the city residents? Because I know some people there don't have a form. But please tell us more about Johnson Flats in particular, the southern area. And if, like, the riverbank was fine, the water came so high, it damaged certain areas, and now they're more at risk, especially for the next spring. So please tell us a little bit more about Johnson Flats, and also please double check everyone in Johnson Flats has those questionnaires and that they know about the deadline.
So I'll refer to the second question in a moment, but on the first one, good point about the road potentially being a dam, so any elevation of the road would be studied for impacts on how it might cause backwater, and then additional drainage, culverts, ditches, etc. would have to be accommodated to allow water to flow up the land. In terms of the water coming across the land and damage on the very south edge there, that's been noted, and some repair options have been identified, and so we're looking at the funding sources for those as part of this ask. So there's many kilometers of land in that category, and it's part of the plan, and we're just kind of waiting on the next steps on the assessment. Calvin, if I can refer the deadline and south end mail question to you. Where's Calvin? I can't see him.
So the deadline is August 24th right now. So far, we're encouraging folks to get the surveys back in by then. We should have included the south end of Johnson Flats and RDKB in the survey mail out. We can double check to see if anyone.
There's no date on some of the Johnson Flats letters. There's no deadline date on the letter.
Yes, and that was our mistake for not including that. So since then, we put it in the paper and sent out the e-newsletter updates and saying that meetings and generally chatting with folks. So we are doing our best to get the word out to the folks that received the letter without the deadline on it. So as long as everyone is working to spread that word, we're confident that we will receive the back by that date. We have received back over a quarter of the survey so far, just to give some context. They are coming in quite strongly. But we will double check for the south end of Johnson Flats. As well, if anyone knows of anyone who didn't receive a survey, please do call the recovery team, and we can either email out the same information and have you fill it out online, or you can come and pick up a paper copy and fill it out.
I'd just like to comment too, in answer to your question, Donna, with respect to people that are at the south end of Johnson Flats, but in the regional district area. They did not receive a survey. This is strictly for the city-owned city residents and city properties. But I'm being told that perhaps they should have received one. But they would not be impacted by the decisions that council is going to be making with respect to potential buyouts and the like. So we would refer that to the regional district.
What happens in the rural area of the river affects the city properties there. And one of the reasons I'm curious about why the dike was taken off as an option is because it's a permanent structure of protection that the government maintains and pays for. With working on berms, is it going to be, after these berms are fixed up a bit this time, it's going to be up to the residents there year to year depending on floods? Is that, like, I thought we need to have some kind of a permanent solution so they don't have to worry about things like that in the future?
That's a good question. I don't have fully an answer. I will follow up on that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Connie Rishenkup. We live in North Rockwell, and I just have a comment. We've lived in that area been married 50 years, have lived in our house for 47, and I was born and raised in North Rockwell. We had swampland there. The industry's filled in, and it seems like since probably 1997, the water seepage has been getting worse and worse, and it's just like the water has been squeezed out of the swamps into our area. As soon as it starts coming up, we used to plant gardens early in the year in April, can't plant now until after the floodwater goes down. Now, the seepage is an issue in that area. If we're made to stay there, if a dike is built or whatever, is there going to be any kind of drainage put in? Is it even possible? Our bottom of our house, bottom floor, once everything was ripped out, the bottom is rotting from the bottom up. We can't keep anything in the basement. It's damp all the time.
That's an excellent question. So in areas where groundwater, seepage, low-lying land, repeated flooding are issues, so you know, if dwellings are remaining in the area, there'll have to be some site-specific solutions. So it's a really good question about, you know, if the land is too saturated to work on a regular basis. That's why some of those neighborhoods identified for buyout as an option, because even with a really good dike in there are still risks of overtopping in a major new feature flood, and it's still difficult to protect against groundwater. In the Johnson Flats area, it's very, very, very difficult to protect against the groundwater, and the amount of drainage infrastructure and amount of diking protection to kind of wrap around the entire thing, including the wetland and spring influence there, made it a really challenging option.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jeff Bainshire. I'm just curious regarding the survey. We have a family home on Granby Road, and we haven't been included in any of this survey. I'm curious to find what's in place for residents such as us along Granby Road. You seem to want input regarding you know, how it affects us and how this is going to go forward, and yet we're being somewhat ignored. Thank you.
So thank you. So in that regard, as you know, we've had site-specific meetings with neighbors in your stretch of the river from both sides of the road. Likewise, we've met with businesses on the downstream and want to capture input from that way. In cases in smaller areas, it sometimes makes sense, rather than doing a large survey, is to meet with the 6 to 10 homeowners in that spot and talk about the issues and the solutions. So with regard to the river side of Granby Road in your area, it is very low-lying and affected by the you know, everything from the dike upstream and across the river and the water levels there. So it's one of the areas identified. We heard your concerns. I think getting feedback about, you know, what the option is, it's already identified that low-lying areas are there, so you can certainly continue to share with us how this affects you. I'll be talking with our information officer about additional outreach opportunities for these areas.
Okay, thank you.
So we're just coming up on 8 o'clock. We'll go to our last question on this side, and then we will be wrapped for this information session. Of course, if we didn't get to install questions, please do contact us. You can go to bfre.ca to submit a contact form, or there's a phone number there as well. If you didn't get one of the contact phone number information sheets from the front on your way in, I would look for one on your way out. And otherwise, you can call the city or the regional district, and they will redirect you to us. So now for our last question of the evening.
We live on Johnson Flats, right at the end of 12th, actually it's Beaker Street. Quite concerned about the raising of 12th Street. From what I've seen there, you need like 10-foot culverts. You say you're going to get it engineered, but my confidence level isn't very high.
Thank you. I'll note the concerns.
And I just want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight. These are important sessions for, I think, both for you and for me as a councillor and Roly as a regional district director. So I hope we'll see just as many of you here on the 5th of September.
5th of September, 6 p.m., same spot here.
And I'll just echo that as well. I think that there was appreciation earlier, but also, that question around creativity and flexibility in terms of how we're delivering this. In large part, that is because of a lot of work on behalf of staff and a lot of work on behalf of the various team leads and so on that we have out here that are helping us navigate. So thank you to those people, and they deserve your thanks and a round of applause.